Hello, everybody. It's Stephen and Walter here for another episode of So Chatty, and this is for February the 18th, 2022, and it's episode 48. And you know how we've been asking you to submit any topics or questions or things that we can, base an episode around. Well, we've gotten quite a few of those, and we would still like some more. But Diane Louise, one of our regular subscribers, sent me a long list of questions. And at first, I thought, well, these aren't really things people would be that interested in, or maybe they're things I have touched on in previous episodes of So Chatty or the Idiot Quilter. But then I got looking at them a little bit more and thought about it and thought, no, actually, these are really good questions. So I organized them a little bit and I jotted down my ideas for these questions, my answers, and I gave a list to Walter to do his homework, to jot down his. So he will be talking from his point of view as a sewist. I will talk from my point of view of being a quilter. Now, I have a feeling that I probably have more things as a quilter to say because quilting, there's such a variety, and not that there isn't a variety in garment sewing, but after you've done some very basic garment sewing in that, it's just basically a theme or
a repeat, I guess.
A repeat, that kind of thing. But these questions too aren't so much specifically about sewing garments or about making a quilt. These are more about how we work, how we gather ideas, how we get our inspiration, things like that. So to start right off the bat, first question is, how do you save and organize inspiration you may want to use later? Well, I just did a thing about, actually, I think it'll go up next week. Or did I put it up this week? I can't remember one week from the other. Anyways, I talked about Mojo and inspiration and how you get your inspiration back. And for me, I gather ideas from a variety of sources. I get them from, the internet, YouTube, things like that. And I've had various methods for recording those ideas for future consideration over the years. I am a list maker and I love to make lists, but then I have to make lists about my lists. And then it comes down to, well, you just get so much stuff. I end up purging every now and then, throwing it all out. But I do have a couple of methods. Now, my first method is what I call a vision board, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Now, when you use the term vision board, and I don't really like the term vision board for what I'm doing, but I can't come up with another term. A vision board is basically where you put pictures and cuttings and clippings, and maybe in the case of being a sewer or a quilter, fabric swatches or thread labels or whatever, things that, you're thinking about using in future projects. My vision board is more primarily patterns that I would like to do. And you can see it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And some of these I've had hanging on my vision board since day one of when I got started quilting and haven't done anything with them. But if I take them and I tuck them away in a filing cabinet, and I do have a filing cabinet full of patterns, and not all those patterns have been done, out of sight, out of mind. So that's why I pin them up here. Now, if I come across maybe some interesting pieces of fabric or something, I might stick those up there as well. But to date, I haven't done that. I do have a couple of articles sitting up there as well that I found on the internet that I thought were kind of interesting. So I put them in sleeve protectors, page protectors, and hung them up there too. So it's always there. It's over by my iron. You can see the top of my iron popping up there. And so it's always there in front of me pretty much when I'm doing anything. The other thing that I do have a planner of sorts, but I've played around with planners for years. Now, the one on the right that says etc. planner, that was started off as a general notebook. It didn't just include quilting, it also included crafting ideas, because at the time that I started this, I had just got into quilting and I was still doing my paper crafting. But now it's pretty much exclusively about quilting. And I have it's a bulleted list. There's a table of contents. There's lots of room to jump around in pages in here. If I run out of space in one spot, I can go a few pages over. And I just keep that in the table of contents so I can find places in my journal. UFOs are in here, finished projects, and I put the date when I finished the project and what it was called. Um, and there's other things in there as well. Now, when we go off, and this is a question later on, but when we go off, or used to go off on our little adventures to quilt stores out of town, I would often keep in this a list of where we had been or where we wanted to go and things like that. So it's really a catch-all for everything. Well, everybody talks about these other planners, like the one on the left, a Quilting Life monthly planner, and there are tons of different types of planners out there that are dedicated to quilters. And this one is okay. It's by Sherry McConnell of A Quilting Life. She also has a larger one that is has more space. It's more like a workbook. The problem I have with these kind of planners, though, is I don't use them in the way that they're in purposing them for. Now, the one thing about this one I'll say for it is she has left it fairly open-ended in the way she's designed it, so that you can use it pretty much any way you want to use it. So I'm experimenting with that one right now, but I still go back to my one with the kangaroo on it on here all the time. But I've tried many planners over the years. The other thing I use is called OneNote, and I'm just going to see if I can switch out of this screen that I'm in right here and show you what OneNote looks like. It's a Microsoft product. It comes, I think it came with Windows 10 and it works with Windows 11. And it's basically like a giant sticky note system where you can organize it into different categories. And you can see right here, I have my notes for So Chatty because I do my vlog notes up here. And I really like using this program a lot. And I do have a quilt journal on here that I'm experimenting with as well, which is basically, I just talk about what I've done each day. I've sat down and done some major sewing, which I have to update it today because I was doing some major sewing today. Why am I doing this? Just to look at my progress over the year, just to get a sense of what I've accomplished and what needs to be accomplished. So that's what I use. Now, I know pretty much what your answer is, but let's pretend, shall we? What do you use to plan, Walter?
I use nothing. I don't plan.
But you probably do plan, but you plan not like I'm a person that has to record things. I always have been that way.
I sort of just have a few things in my mind.
And I don't know how you keep them there. You forget which room you've walked into.
No, I know. I have a couple of patterns sitting there that I know that I want to get to and review. I have a couple of projects that I still have to finish. So I try not to bog myself down with too many things that I want to do too far in advance. I sort of like, when I get to it, I'll look for something new. I don't really, unless there's something that I actually see that I really think I want to do sometime in the future, I might set it aside as something I might want to do in the future. But it's not, I don't have any really big.
And where do you set it aside?
Well, if it's a pattern, I have a copy of the pattern or something like that.
On your computer?
No, it's usually a physical pattern.
So when you go to look for it, and the reason I'm asking this question is because you can never find anything.
I know where they are.
Oh, do you?
But I don't have like tens of thousands like I have two.
Oh, okay.
Actually, or maybe three right now that I might get to do. But it's not. And the other thing is, I may have a pattern for something, and then we'll get to that pattern and think, I don't like this pattern. I'm gonna look up a different pattern.
Well, yeah.
So,
well, I have the same problem.
Like, I mean, it's not. I don't have anything set in stone what I have to do in the future. I just sort of just, okay, what do I feel like doing now? Yeah.
Well, actually, no, that's kind of what I do too. But when I write things down in a journal or that, I'm not committed to that. That's just so I don't
never
forget
really
it.
that good at work either. I was supposed to be organized at work.
Now the secret.
And all I would organize is what I would have to do from one day to the next.
For the government.
Oh, so get out.
Explain something. Well, whereas I had to keep notes in that because as a school teacher,
well,
I had to do that.
That's not entirely true. I was forced to at work set up a plan for my work that went from week to week to month to month. But that was a forced thing. I'm not I'm retired now. I don't, I'm forced to do that.
You know, the thing too, though, about what I find, I know that's not your style, I know that. And everybody has their own style. But what I find for me is if I don't write it down, I won't remember it because I'm one of those kind of people that collects ideas. My brain is always working. Even when I'm asleep, I'm working on something in my head. And I'm always answering the question, what if?
I think probably the way I do it, I'm not very efficient. So, which I
Again,
know you're not,
government employer.
but that's okay.
Okay.
That's just the way I am.
Well, if it works for you, it works for you. That's all. There isn't a right way or a wrong way. It depends on the individual. So the second question here that Diane wrote is, how do you document what sewing machine / long arm settings and techniques you have successfully used and may want to use in the future? Well, I don't. I don't document them.
Actually, I don't either. Actually, the only thing I've documented is on my. I have a certain setting I like to use when I use the when I create a buttonhole, and I have a little piece of paper tucked in with my buttonholer that tells me what settings I like to use, so I remember that. But that's the only thing. I mean, I have things in the top of my head that I know. Like if I want to do a basting stitch, I know I use like a 4-inch length stitch or whatever. And if I have things that I do when I'm sewing a shirt or something, and I sort of have a general idea of what I know what stitch lengths to use and what setting to use on my machine. I don't really have the need to write it down. Unless, like I said, with the buttonhole or something like that, it's something that I know that I'm going to forget from time to time. So I put a piece of paper in with the buttonhole.
Well, I don't write it down either. However, having said that, like I just remember it because it's routine. And usually most of the settings that I'm using to make a quilt are the same settings all the time. Like what button do I push for a 1/4-inch seam allowance, that kind of thing. But when I first got into this, I did make notes. And I kept them in that little journal book that I showed you with the kangaroo on it. And those are still in there. And on occasion, I actually had taped a note to my sewing machine, especially when I had the 15,000 and I had to switch over to embroidery. I needed different settings. So I wrote down the procedure and the order of putting those settings in because it was a little bit more like that was something much newer to me. And then after a while, I didn't need that anymore.
Like I do have different settings on my serger and my cover lock machine. Cover stitch machine.
Cover stitch, yeah.
And it sometimes my dials move. I usually have the same settings all the time, but sometimes for some reason I hit them and my dials move slightly off. What I always do before I do a cover stitch or I do a serger thing, I always do test cloths to make sure the settings are where I want them to be, like that I'm getting the stitching coming out the way I want them to be. I don't really have a set. I have never had too much of a need to have to adjust my settings too much on some of the things that I've done. But what I've always done is I've run tests through to make sure that it's stitching correctly the way I want it to stitch before I actually start stitching on my fabric.
Well, now on occasion I might write a note on a sticky note and stick it to like I may attach it to a pattern I'm working on because I've altered something in the pattern or for future reference, like if the pattern had a mistake in it or something, I may note that, and if I ever go to that pattern, then there's the sticky note telling me what to do.
I've done on shirts, the placement where the pocket goes. I've written on the pattern where the placement goes for the pocket, so that I know.
And I've also stuck sticky notes inside the actual manual for the sewing machine, and use them like a tab. Like I'll have the sticky notes hang out part way on the manual, so I can go to it if it's something I don't do very often. Like for example, you're talking about buttonholing. Well, I hardly ever use the buttonholer, and sometimes I have to go back to the manual to find that. And the way Janome manuals are written are pretty crappy. They don't give you a table of contents. They don't they give you sort of one, but and they don't have an index in the back of them at all, which is just the crap with that. So I mark the page that has that, and I'll put it on this sticky note, and I'll write it at the right near the top of the sticky note on the opposite end of where the sticky part is. So it looks like a tab, but it'll say like buttonhole or something like that. And I'll use it like a bookmark. So that hangs over the top of the book off the page a little bit. And so I can just go right to that page with it, which reminds me, I want to do that with the Lucy manual for threading the bobbin and threading the, or which way the scarf goes on the needle, because I put it in backwards the other day and had to along. But that's a story for another day. And there are times too, back to this one I told you, the OneNote on my computer, I will put, if it's something that I don't go to very regularly, but I want it nearby, I'll add a indexed page right in OneNote so I can find that very quickly, because that's always up on my screen on my computer. So the next question is, oh, you have anything else you want to say about that?
Not really. I have some stitches, like, I mean, I have a guide for my machine that shows you all the different stitches on there.
Okay, you're jumping ahead.
Okay, well, okay.
That was question 3.
Okay.
So, since you jumped ahead, the question for number 3 was, have you made samples of decorative stitches to refer to? Okay, what were you going to say?
Well, actually, I was going to say I have certain stitches that I do, like buttonholers, buttons, and I do a bar tack stitch. Actually, I have the numbers of those memorized in my mind, so I usually don't have to go refer back to the manual for it to figure out what stitch that is.
Well,
I mean, I could write them down somewhere, but I haven't bothered to. So
yeah, well, the question's asking, have you made samples of decorative stitches to refer to? And I said yes and no. When I got my very first sewing machine with all kinds of decorative stitches, I decided to stitch each one out, and I stitched it out on a square of fabric, and I even went as far in some cases to start naming them by actually using the monogram feature in the sewing machine as a decorative stitch. That took forever, and I think there were like 300 on that machine, 15,000, 300 decorative stitches. And guess what? I seldom use a decorative stitch on my sewing machine. And so when I got the Continental M7, I never bothered. And the other thing too is, actually on the Continental M7, there is a picture of what those stitches look like. It's built right onto the sewing machine. And it was the same with the 15,000, and I think the 6700 has a a piece you can sit on top of it, right?
yeah,
And shows you all the decorative stitches. So actually, Janome on those machines has done the work for you.
well, not only that, I've used decorative stitches on bags and things like that, and usually I want a specific look of stitch at the time that I'm doing that decorative stitch, and the decorative stitches change depending on your stitch width or your stitch length or things like that. So you can get a different look from different decorative stitches just by changing like the width or the length or something like that. So you may have it on a sample of it on a stitched out, but it's probably using a standard stitch width and stitch length, and it may look completely different than what you want to end up using. So what I always do is I sort of pick 2 or 3 decorative stitches that I think I might want to use and do practice stitches and see if they're ones that I really want to use or not. So on the specific item that I'm using.
So when you figure out which one you want to use, do you keep that sample for future reference?
No, because it's a one-off usually for me, unless it's something that I'm going to reuse.
Well, I was going to say, if I was to do that, and I don't, but if I was to do that, I think I would keep the sample, label it, and I don't know, I'd put it somewhere. You know, maybe put it on a ring.
If I know myself well
you
enough,
wouldn't find it.
Then I'll never find it again. So why bother?
Yeah. So question number 4 is, have you purchased any color charts for threads or fabric solids? Well, no, I haven't. I have looked at them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've looked at the ones that Ultimate Sewing sells at Ultimate Sewing. Yeah, that for Floriani threads, because I have so many of them. But they want like $50 or $60 for that, and it's not, those ones that they have in the store now are a little bit dated. The beauty of having something like that is it's not just a picture, it's the actual thread in there, so you can feel the thread, you can see the color of that thread, and not have to rely upon like a printed out color, because you'll get a color shift depending on the printer, depending on the computer, all that kind of stuff. But
in your case, you've got almost every single color of Floriani thread that you can get.
True.
Right? In a drawer.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like you're going to go, oh, I could use this thread color because I don't have it. Right?
No,
store and
yeah.
get it. You already have it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah.
You already have something that's like that.
But, okay, let's say Aurifil. Now, I did buy a lot of Aurifil when I first got into sewing because, you know, thread's pretty kind of a thing. But to be quite honest, I only use one color. When I'm piecing, white. When I'm putting a binding on or whatever, that one may be a color, of course, to match the backing fabric and the binding or whatever. Of course, the threads for Lucy, well, the same. I have them in a drawer. I can look at them all at a glance, and I don't really feel the need to have a color chart of those.
The same with me is like I've got I pick thread based on what garment I'm sewing, like what color of the garment I'm sewing or whatever. And I have a really good selection of threads, right? And if I can't find anything in my selection, I can always rate his selection.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
And does.
And but I have a really good selection of threads, and I'm not that uptight if my thread does not exactly match my fabric. I like to have something that it's pretty close to what I want.
Well, yeah.
But if it's not exactly, I mean,
it's not the end of the world.
Thread stitch. I mean, unless you get a magnifying glass and get up close to make sure that it's the same color.
I don't think you can find thread that is exactly the color of a fabric, because there's something called dye lots and that.
And I don't think a thread chart really helps you, because I'll have the shirt that I'm doing right now, which I've been doing forever, but I thought at first black would look good on that shirt because there was a lot of black in the shirt. But I had about 3 different blue colors I could choose from as well. And so I do sample stitches on that shirt to see what color I think looks best with when I'm stitching it. It turns out I picked a color that was completely different than I thought would look good on that shirt. Right? And it surprised me that the color that worked so well with that shirt. So if I had a color card, I would never have picked that color.
However, I can see a use for a color card if you had one, say, for, like in the case of embroidery, for Floriani, Madeira, and Isacord. Okay? Now, I do have some, not Isacord, but the other one, Madeira. I do have some Madeira threads, but I only have a few colors in that. But what would be interesting is to have, if you had a color chart for those 3 brands or 2 brands, because the colors do change between the brands because of the way they manufacture them. So, if you were looking, that might help you to pick the one. But, I don't get that picky about it. So,
and like in embroidery, you often get, it tells you to use color number or something for whatever you're using. Well, the thread I use on embroidery is a brand that isn't generally used anywhere. So I look at the project I'm using, and I look at thread selection that they've chosen, and I look at it and I think, well, I don't really like that color, so I need to switch it to a different color.
Well, I do that too. I do that too as well.
I made this one that's a butterfly on the outside of the bag, and a lot of the butterfly colors were this really rusty brown color on it. And I didn't really like that. So I changed the color to more of a fuchsia color.
Yeah.
And it came out looking really good.
It was fine.
And it didn't, I didn't follow the pattern. So.
Well, another thing though, if like fabric charts. Now, there are some companies that you can order fabric from, and you can get a fabric chart. Now, I think this would be more appropriate for what you do than what I do, because quilting cotton is quilting cotton, basically. But if you've got all kinds of different types of fabrics, like double knit and polyester and whatever, and that, something like that might be handy. But those don't come at a cheap price, and they'd be for probably only one company. It's not like it's generic and go like, here's what linen is and here's what silk's like, and that it would be, whatever
Yeah,
company's
like
manufacturing it.
there is a place that says sells a lot of jersey, and they sometimes have color cards that you can get with all the jersey fabric, so you can take you can sort of match the little swatch up with maybe another fabric that you're using, and you can sort of order. It's easier for you to order the fabric if you sort of know the color that you want. But even fabric for me, I can usually get away with, okay, I'm sort of looking for this color. I'm sort of looking for that. I'm not that picky, so.
Yeah, but I think those kind of charts are more or less for the different types of actual fabric as opposed to the color.
Yeah.
Now, I do have a chart though for batting. I just got it a few weeks ago, and I talked about it on another episode of Idiot Quilter. But I use Hobbs batting, and they had this handy dandy little chart that they don't actually make available to the general public. But because I went to a special webinar, the company that the webinar was from one of the representatives from Hobbs Batting, and for a limited time and only a limited selection, I was able for $10 to pick up one of these charts. And that I think is handy, because I don't, you tell me, okay, I usually use 80/20, but I'm not really sure about wool, or there is silk, and there's other kinds. Hobbs makes quite a few different battings. So it was a way, like down the road, maybe I want to try something a little different, but I'll know what it's like because I actually have a sample card with actual pieces of the different battings mounted to it. So that one I think is going to be kind of handy. I won't use it a lot, but when I do, I've got it. So that takes me to, no, next question. Number 5. Yeah. Do you keep an inventory list of supplies? Well, I know your answer to that.
No. No. I have a lot of supplies, and they very rarely hit a spot where I have to say, oh, I got to go out and get something for a project. So if I start a project, I might make sure I have everything for that project in advance, like, so I don't have to run out and get something. But I do have a lot of supplies, and a lot of times when I run out of something, I immediately buy it again, just so that I've got it on hand for a future project.
Yeah, well, I do the same thing.
Unlike a lot of people might have, some people may have an embroidery machine or something, and they only buy thread for that particular embroidery project that they're working on. We're kind of embroidery crazy, because the thread that I use, there's 175 colors that you can get in that thread, and I have all 175 colors.
Yeah, we have colors for everything.
And he has Floriani thread, and there's over 300 colors of Floriani thread, and he has over 300 spools of different Floriani.
Yeah, I have actually over 400. There's more than 300
yeah,
colors.
Okay, so we're and basically, what do you do when you for inventory, when you run out of Floriani thread? You go out and replace.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I do exactly what you do. Even though it may not be, I don't want to start a project and then go, crap, I don't have the colors I want and I have to run out and get it. I like to buy ahead. And that is why you might think I'm obsessive, and it's a lot of money tied up in thread. Believe me, a lot of money. Like, we're talking
thousands of dollars.
Yeah, thousands of dollars in thread. I didn't buy them all at once, but I bought everything there was.
Yeah, pretty much. With me, with the thread that I use, I didn't buy them all at once, but I bought them in a series of purchases over time till I got the whole set.
It's kind of like buying toilet paper, okay? You don't want to be caught without toilet paper, right? So what did most people do? They usually stock up on toilet paper regularly.
If you're a little kid and you got crayons And you want all the different colors.
Well, yeah, you want the box of 128, by God's sakes. Yes, you do. That was one of the best thrills in my
Yeah,
life as a
I know.
kid.
When I was a little kid, I wanted the big box
I want
of
the big box
Crayola
with the sharpener.
with the sharpener.
With the
yeah.
sharpener. My mother said, "You don't want that. It'll get all over the floor." Well, my mother didn't like anything that made a mess. But anyways, that kind of got us off topic. But what I was going to say about this, and I have to look at my notes to see what I was going to say with it. I tried to keep a list of all my rulers, all my tools, all my books, all my threads, and everything, and it drove me mental because you acquire quite a bit very fast. Now, the reason I want to do this, and I think it is a good idea when you're first starting out, so it doesn't, like right now, there's no way I could do an inventory and write it all down because I'd be spending way too many days trying to do that, and no. But I have bought duplicates of things before, like 2 rulers the same, specialty rulers, and you know how much rulers cost. You're talking 20, 25, 30, 35 and up. So there's $30 I bought on a duplicate thing because I forgot that I had it and don't need it. So it's probably a good idea to keep a list, but I know my stuff pretty well now that I don't run into that problem. But the one thing too is for the Floriani thread, I do have an app on my phone, which allows me to keep an inventory, and I did put all my threads into that. And when I run out of a thread, there's a shopping list feature, so I can just hit that button next to that thread, put it in the shopping list, and so the next time I'm over at Ultimate Sewing, I'll go, yeah, I need to stock up on this one, this one, this one, and I have all the numbers and it's right there. So I do keep that up because I find that very handy. And somebody just a week or two ago, I think when I was had a Zoom meeting with the Quilters Way, the group I belong to, was it that, or was it, no, it might have been at Craft and Chat. Someone was talking about an app called Library Thing, and it's for your phone, and it reads the barcodes on the back of any books that you have and puts them into a catalog. And you can have several different catalogs. You can customize the catalogs, but it has all the information, including a picture of the cover of the book, just by that barcode. Because what it's doing is it's going into the ISBN number onto the internet, and it finds it and puts it in your phone. Now, to date, I've only used it for one book, but that's something I thought I would use, but I keep forgetting about it and everything. But a very good app. But here is an app. I went looking, and maybe somebody out there knows if there is one. I want an app that does the same thing as that library thing, but with patterns. I want it to be able to read the ISBN number on the back, or the barcode on the back of a pattern, and plug that in for me. And I've done a search and I can't find anything that'll work with patterns. There are lots of cataloging programs and apps out there for different things, like for books and for all kinds of things. But I haven't been able to find one where I can just simply, there's the barcode, bang, it's in there. There are programs you can get, but I'd have to list the pattern and fill it all in. Like, I could make a database if I wanted to, but guess what? I don't want to. That's too much work. It's not worth it to me. But if anybody knows of an app like what I'm speaking of, let me know, because I would definitely be interested in exploring that. So anything else you want to say about keeping an inventory list of supplies?
No, not really.
No. So next question Diane has, do you record all the quilts and garments you have made? Do you?
Not really. I take a picture of everything I make.
Yeah.
And
then what do you do with the picture?
Well, I have a library of pictures that I have.
So you are keeping them.
Sort of,
you are documenting them.
I guess.
Yeah.
Not. I mean, I sometimes have called it the name of the pattern, where I try and usually make it the name of the pattern of the garment that I've made, so that I know what pattern to go back to if I did that. But I haven't really used that many patterns that I would get them confused so far.
Yeah.
So, like, I mean, a long sleeve shirt is one pattern I've used. Short sleeve shirt is one pattern I've used. Right?
A lot there.
A lot. Like, I mean, the short sleeve shirt, I've used the same pattern over and over again. So, but maybe if I got more into garment sewing, I'll start having to inventory which shirts or which patterns go where or whatever. But I haven't yet had to do that. So
Well, I do. Um, I keep a list in my quilt journal that I was talking about before, and I what the name of the pattern was and the date I finished it. That's all I put in there. But I also take pictures of each of the quilts and I put them in a directory on my computer. And just not too long ago, and I did a thing on Idiot Quilter about this, I have Photoshop Elements on my computer. And there is a facility within Photoshop Elements where you can simply take everything that's in a specific directory and it'll make a thumbnail of what's there. You can also set it up so that if you've named these, it'll put the name underneath it. And you can set it up in a variety of different ways and create a catalog. And what I do is I just had it, I printed them all out. And there's a glare, of course, but this is what it does. It prints it out, thumbnails, and I can change the size of these. I put it this size so there's 9 on a page. And I have all those pictures here, and underneath each one is the name that I called it. So I know it's there, and I just put it on an O-ring, and I hang it up over on the cabinet over there. So I do have sort of a catalog, a visual catalog. Plus I have it all on my computer as well. Now, when I first got into quilting, and because I came from a scrapbooking background, I thought I would do scrapbook pages about each quilt that I created. I did one. My heart wasn't in it. I wasn't that interested in it. It was taking me a fair amount of time just to document everything about it and whatnot. I am sure down the road, if I ever became a famous quilter or something, this would be something in a museum. It would be treasured by generations to come. Not in my family, or no, in my lifetime. So I stopped doing that. So that's basically all I do is I document them when they're finished in my quilt journal, and I take several pictures of them. I always forget to take pictures of the back of the quilt. I've started to make that a habit now. And they sit on my computer and I have the visual. Now, somebody's going to say, but what happens if your computer crashes and everything? So what would happen if your computer crashed? What do? Do you have a
I have
backup
all
system?
kinds of backups.
Yeah, so do I. I back up my computers every week. In several space, I actually grandparent my backups.
I have a backup for a nightly backup that does automatically on my computer to
You have a Mac.
solid state drive, and plus all the more important things that I have on my computer is backed up on the iCloud. So
yeah. It's very thorough. Well, he comes from an IT background, so you know. So the next question: if you have multiple projects in process, do you keep a list? Do you keep a list of projects you have purchased supplies for but haven't started? Well, no.
I have a couple items sitting around that I need to finish, and that's about it.
I don't. I do make a list of projects I want to make in the future. Again, in my journal with that. I don't. I do and I don't keep a list of projects that I've purchased supplies for, but I haven't started. The way I do that is, if you see behind Walter, if you just move your head, no, a lot. See the plastic cases back there? You can't, because you can't look over Walter. Oh, move. That would be there. See these plastic boxes up here, this tower? Well, they're okay. You can bring your head back in. They're those project boxes you can buy at Michael's or Joann's, that kind of thing. They were originally made to hold scrapbooking supplies or craft kits. Keep your crafting supplies for whatever you're working on, your cards or whatever. Well, and that's what I used to use them for. Now I use them for projects. So they're labeled. And I put my pattern, my fabric, and all of that, everything that's related to that project, into one of those project boxes. Sometimes I have to use 2 project boxes. Now, if I have to use 2 project boxes, then I'll label them 1 of 2, 2 of 2, so I know that there's more than one, because some of these will sit on the shelf and I won't get back to them for a long time. You know, it works that way. But that's the way I organize projects I want to do. So the other day, I just organized 3 project boxes over there for an upcoming retreat that Ultimate Sewing's having at the end of March. And these are 3 projects I want to work on during the days that we're at the retreat. So I've started the boxes. I have the basic fabrics that I want to use, but what I will do is before I go to the retreat, I will cut all my fabric for those 3 projects, so I don't have to worry about cutting them at the retreat, doing any major cutting there. And I'll put those pieces in Ziploc bags and mark them, if it's A pieces, B pieces, whatever. So there is little bags inside the project box as well. And it just makes life so much easier when you're working on a project. But that's how I put things together. I don't really write down any detailed notes. If I do want detailed notes about something, I'll put them on a sticky note and I stick them inside the project box with the project, like stick it to the pattern or even stick it to the lid on the inside of the project box. So that way I know where they are. Walter has to hunt.
Yeah, I have to hunt
with a shovel.
I'm not organized
on his floor.
So
Anything else you want to say about multiple projects? Do you actually do multiple projects?
actually, I have a tendency not to. I have a tendency to have to finish what I'm working on, and I'll rather not start something else until I've finished what I'm working on. So
Yeah, I'm kinda
even
that
if
way
I
too.
procrastinate, so that's why I sometimes procrastinate working on something, because and not get it finished is I still haven't gone to the next project. Like, I mean, I could drop it and go to another project, but I'll know I'll never go back and finish the first project. So I have to finish the first project. So
Well, I'm kind of that way too, but I do usually have several projects on the go. One will be a sewing project, like a quilting project. Another one will be more of an embroidery project. And so if I'm just not feeling it for the quilting thing one day or something, or I'm just getting tired of this, I may turn over and go to the embroidery project and vice versa over the two. But generally speaking, I don't like a lot of UFOs hanging around. Now, having said that, I do have some. But
I have two that are somewhat UFOs. One I'm not sure if I'll ever get back to, but the other one I do want to get back to, but and I know I will. It's just that I have to get this thing done that I'm working on now. before I go back.
Well, I listen to a variety of different quilting podcasts, and at the beginning of this year, of course, the New Year's resolution, clean up, everything like that, getting a fresh start for the year, planning your year. They talked in there about doing multiple projects, but it's putting yourself on a schedule. Like, okay, on Mondays and Wednesdays, I'm going to work on a quilting project. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm going to work on my embroidery project. On the weekend, I'm going to do blah, blah, blah. And that appeals to me in some way because I was used to a bell system when I was teaching. So, from 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, I had this class, and that kind of thing. But then when I retired, I still tried to do that because it was so ingrained in me after 31 years of teaching, your kind of life is ruled by bells, or whatever. But I soon learned that I couldn't do that because I just might not be in the mood on that day. And if you're not really into it and it's something that's supposed to be fun, then why are you forcing yourself? You're just going to make yourself miserable with that. So, although I think that's a really interesting way to schedule your time to get things done, if you're in a business making garments or making quilts or something like that, maybe you do have to do that. But if it's just your hobby in that, for me, I don't see that kind of discipline having to have that.
I mean, you worked all your life in
Yeah.
a rigid environment, and for some people, they have to have that rigidity, right? But you look forward to retirement to do whatever you want
Yeah.
to do. So,
But having said that too, I'm still the kind of person that needs to be organized and I have to feel like I've made the day count. So I have a weekly list and it's divided down into each day of the week, and I have squares on it. I've tried different methods. This one seems to be my current one. And I write down what I'm going to do that day. And I write it in advance. And I look at my calendar on my phone because I keep things in that too. And it's just a way for me to keep organized. And because I do not like to sit around and have that feeling that once the day's gone, I didn't get anything accomplished. Other people have a different philosophy. I know about that. It's just whenever the mood grabs me. You're such a hippie. But
Yeah.
anyway, so last question, or no, it's not the last question. It says, you mentioned that before COVID, you'd like to visit a specific region and visit multiple fabric stores. Do you have a list of what order is best to visit them in? Well, basically, we pick an area and we do an internet search beforehand and see what quilt stores are in the area, where they're located. And then we figure out how you're going to get there. And we'll probably put that into our phone or into our GPS system. Actually, one and the same these days anymore with that. And then sort of organize our route. Like, what's the best, so we're not bebopping back and forth and backtracking. So we sit down and plan it. Before COVID, around my birthday, which is in July, we would go for about 3 days to an area that's about 2.5 hours west of us. And it's where there's a lot of, it's Mennonite country. There's a lot of quilt stores in that area around all kinds of things. And we would do the quilt stores all over. And we had it all organized for that. But if we go to some place we've never been before, we'll always look first for, are there quilt stores, interesting stores, and plan our route according to that.
And for me, I didn't really start into garment sewing until COVID hit. So I haven't really been to a place that sells garment material except for Fabricland, which is a local
the F store, as we call it,
local chain store. And so I'm not used to actually picking out fabric. I'm used to looking at it online and ordering it online, which I'll probably still do. Some of the favorite stores that I have are way too far out to go to.
Yeah, they're in other countries.
No, or actually a couple in another country, but a couple in Canada that are several hours flight to get there.
Yeah. Road trip.
So, and actually, the one I order from a lot, which is in Calgary, actually doesn't have a storefront, so I couldn't actually go visit them. So,
but that's right. I hadn't thought of that before, but it's been a couple. Well, we haven't since COVID been able to do our little jaunt in July to go quilt shopping. So when we are able to do that again, then something new we can add, like broaden our search for more like fabric kind of places, textiles.
But the problem is with textiles for me is that I usually don't buy fabric up front like you do for quilting. Like, you might go to quilt shop and say, oh, I like that fabric, and you might buy it for a future project, right? But when I make something for a garment other than like a shirt, I mean, I could buy stuff in advance for a shirt.
You do?
Because, yeah, I do. But that's for, I mean, that I know what kind of fabric I'm going to use, and I know I'm going to make a shirt again, right? But, I mean, if I'm buying fabric for a coat or for another kind of specialty project, specialty garment project, I may only want to buy fabric for that one project, because if I start buying garment fabric for future projects, I may get stuck with a bunch of garment fabric that I'll never use.
Yeah.
Right. And I have already done that. Like, I ordered a bunch of fabric that was on sale from a company that I thought wouldn't come amiss because it was a good price. And I have a box full of this fabric. I don't know what to do with it.
Well, another aspect of this too is money that's involved. When we do this, I've already planned to spend money. I'm not going into a quilting store on one of these little excursion kind of things and probably not buy anything. I'll probably see something I want, but I don't want to have to sit there and, like, within reason, I don't want to say, oh, yeah, that's nice, but I don't know if I want to buy that much of it, or, that's kind of pricey or whatever. So I plan my finances to cover that. And I set aside a fair amount of money for it. It's not uncommon that I have spent over $1,000 on one of these jaunts on fabric, but all planned for. This is not something that's going to put me in the poorhouse. I've budgeted for it. I have it there. But what I'm saying is, what's the point of going on these little shop hops if you're restricting yourself because of finances? Plan your finances, like save some money aside if you can, or something like that for it. Because where's the fun? You want to buy, right? So, and you don't want to feel guilty about it afterwards. You want to come out of there and go, oh, I really shouldn't have bought that. Oh, you know, and the moan and the groan thing. No, go, enjoy, plan for it, have a good time. So the last question that Diane had is, I would also like to see, she says, a short segment, Never Say Never, where you mention a few sewing projects you don't think you'll ever try. Well, was there anything you won't try?
The only thing I can think of that I won't try is when it is real. When it's a garment, it has to be a garment that I really want to wear. Like I'm not going to sew a garment I'm not going to wear.
Well, right.
Well, actually, I have already sewn a couple of garments that I won't wear because they're not my style.
But you want to learn the technique.
I want to learn technique. I did turn down the opportunity to take a class earlier this year for a garment. It was a coat, an overcoat, that I know for sure I won't wear, and it would be expensive to make. And I didn't think that the techniques would be that that I would learn to make this overcoat would be that much more than anything else that I've done. So I turned down the opportunity to take that class because I knew I would end up making an expensive coat that I wouldn't wear. So
Yeah.
that's one of my limitations for that. As far as projects that I won't tackle, I'll pretty much tackle anything. I can't think of anything I wouldn't tackle.
Yeah,
Off the top of my head.
I would.
I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to maybe reupholster a chair or something like that.
But that's not really.
I mean,
sewing.
other than a kitchen chair or something, I've done that.
Yeah, you've done that. I was going to say, what do you mean you've done it?
I meant like
you
a
meant like a
couch or
real couch.
something
Well,
like that.
I'm glad there's people for that. That has no appeal to me. But I'll try almost anything in quilting once. One thing though I do stay away from is hand sewing projects. Now I have tried hexies, and that kind of thing, and I got into them for a while, but I am just so bad with the needle and thread. I hurt myself a lot, and you've heard me talk about the fact that I spew blood if I'm hand sewing. I've never liked hand sewing. My thread always gets tangled up. It's just, for me, it is something that I avoid. I won't even sew a button on a shirt. Thank God I know how to do it with the sewing machine. In fact, I love doing it on a sewing machine.
Yeah.
But I will not do it by hand. I hate it. I just hate hand sewing.
Actually, I don't like hand sewing
No.
either, and I always cringe when I'm doing a garment and they say, "Oh, you'll have to hand sew this to close it," and I'm going, "Oh, great! I didn't know I'd have to do that."
That's the same when I turn things, like if I make a placemat without putting a binding on it and do the pill slip method or whatever they call it, where you turn it inside out and then turn it back the other way, and you've got a gap, right? And they always talk about hand sewing it. I don't. I sew it with a sewing machine. Yes, it's probably not maybe as accurate and fine as if you did it by hand, but I just can't stand doing it. So I'll live with the slight variation in it as long as I can use the sewing machine for it. Now other things but anything else in sewing, I mean, applique, I don't hate applique, and I've done it. And once I get into applique, I do kind of like it, like raw edge applique. I don't know about needle turning.
I don't know that I'd sew lingerie.
Why, you don't want to make something frilly for yourself? Some little sexy little silky item? Oh, you'd look so cool. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's got to be a garment I'm gonna wear. I don't wear lingerie. So.
You don't?
No.
Oh, you
And
don't.
I don't know anybody that wears lingerie.
You don't wear women's clothes? No? Okay, kinky.
I don't know anybody that wears lingerie, do I?
How about leather? Chaps,
Leather. Actually,
straps.
that would be an interesting project to do. I'm not opposed to doing it.
No.
Like
A little whip to go with the
it
outfit.
would be a challenge.
Oops. Yeah, well, let's not get too far into that discussion. What else was I going to say about it? One quilt, though, I'm never going to make. I started it, and I will never, ever finish it, is a Dear Jane quilt. Oh, my God. I bought the pattern from Electric Quilt for it, the book, the whole bit. it cost me about $50 for this or something like that before materials. And I started making some of the blocks. They're too small. They're too tedious. Hell no. Dear Jane, there's a reason why she's famous. She had more patience than anybody else in the world and she did it by hand sewing because she made it in the 1800s and that. And yeah, it's an interesting quilt because it's all sample pieces and that, but nope, way too much work. Not going to do it. I'm not wasting my life on a Dear Jane quilt. And other projects like, there's a ton of YouTube videos out there about knitting. And everybody seems to be into this knitting. And I knit once in my life, and I had a really bad experience that involved the cat getting sick, and that's a story for another day.
Knitted one time. I wanted to learn how to knit because my mother always knitted, and I did for a period of time when I was younger, learn how to knit and knitted a few sweaters.
Yeah, you knitted Icelandic sweaters.
And
when he says he knit a few sweaters, we're not talking here an amateur. He doesn't do anything amateur. He made beautiful sweaters. They were absolutely gorgeous.
The only
sweaters.
thing is I don't really wear sweaters anymore.
No, I know that's the thing.
And I don't have a real urge to make new ones. So,
and like knitting, in some ways, I think, well, it's one of those things you could do while you're watching TV or something like that, or you're on a long road trip and you could take it in the car, as long as you're not driving, and I never am. And do something like that, handwork. That's why I started doing hexies. I thought, well, this is something that's easy. It's very portable and the whole bit. But I was going through too many Band-Aids for that. And I used to crochet when I was much younger. I haven't done that in years, but that doesn't really appeal to me because the look of something that's crocheted, I'm sorry, I don't want to offend anybody that's a crocheter, but that stuff is just, okay, put it this way, it's primitive looking. Now, I know that's a trend. And knitting, how many sweaters or scarves and all these guys that knit are making these shawls and cowls. Okay.
I'm not a cowl person.
It's not my look. Okay. Whatever. I mean, yeah, they make stuff that looks nice. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't want to offend anybody that does that, but it's definitely not my cup of tea. So I guess I will probably never do that.
Like I said, I did knit at one point, but it's like one of those things that I really haven't had a huge desire to go back to.
I mean, I love looking at the wool.
Yeah, the wool's nice.
The wool, like when I was knitting back, well, when I tried to knit, when I crocheted like 40 years ago or longer, there wasn't the selection.
Well, no, I used to go to a specialty wool shop that sold European wools, and it was expensive.
Of course you did.
And the wools were nice, but actually now there's much more selection of people are more into hand dyeing,
and the colors are fantastic.
Like
I just wish a lot of those colors could be made into fabric because they'd look really good, a lot of them. But no. So bottom line for me is, yeah, if it catches my fancy, I'll try it once, and if it works out and I like it, I might try it again. And if it doesn't, well, chalk it up to, experience. Okay, anything else you want to say about that?
No.
Okay, well, that's quite a few questions there, and thank you, Diane, for sending those to us because, yeah, it really made me think about a lot of things that I really hadn't thought about in a formal way before. So just before we go, a couple of reminders. We're coming close. This is advance notice. Craft and Chat is sneaking up on us because it comes very early in March. Because it's always the first Wednesday. Well, the first Wednesday of March is March the 2nd. So I'm going to start putting into all of my vlogs and everything on YouTube the Zoom link for that. And we're growing. Each time we get one or two more people, which is great. So that's the 2nd. And then on March the 5th, right 3 days later, we have the big Idiot Quilter Retreat. And all the stuff about that is in the show notes below if you haven't yet checked that out. We're up to about 40 people now that are planning to come. So I anticipate that there'll be, some people at the last minute that won't be able to show up for one reason or another. That's fine. So there's still plenty of room on that. And again, it's not something you have to be there the whole day for, whatever. You can drop in for a while, whatever fits your schedule. And on March the 4th, the day before that, in the evening at 7 p.m., we will be hosting our icebreaker cocktail party before the retreat, which we just all get together and meet the other people that you might be seeing the next day at the retreat, and just have a good time. Bring something along if you want to show us what you might be planning to work on during the retreat, or something you've already finished that you're really proud about. And we might play a game or two as well, and have beverages. You supply your own beverages, okay? And whatever form those may take. And let's see. Oh yeah, and I have 3 special guest speakers lined up now, and one that I've already hinted at that I'm excited about having all 3. But this one individual was definitely, yeah, I'm really excited about having this person at the retreat. But I'm not telling you. It's a surprise. And of course, there'll be prizes. So yeah, stuff about the retreat is all in the show notes below. And yeah, I think that's about it for us today. So any final comments, words, praise? No? All right. So hope everybody has a good week, and we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.